Going live Wednesday live. It's what we're doing. Going live Wednesday live. Sweet. What is going on, everybody? It's Wednesday. It's hump day. Oh, it's been a long week so far. What are these subscription goals? Oh, sweet. All right. So we're doing weight loss Q&A, weight loss med Q&A, all the above, whatever you'd like to know, or I can just randomly talk about what have I been learning lately. Can't remember. Today was a bit of a blur. But yeah, weight loss meds. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank here, everybody. So yeah, there's really no new updates on the weight loss world. There's a lot of cool things that are definitely in the pipeline and coming out. I know they have one drug in phase 2 clinical trials right now that I believe is a combination of the GLP-1 receptor agonist. So it's like Wegovy, Ozempic, Saxenda, all of them. And then it also has another component that I believe it has something to do with myostatin or something like that. But essentially the individuals that were taking it thus far is that they're not only losing fat, but they're also building muscle at the same time. Now it's phase 2, so very much a long ways away from being a full-blown clinical trial and making it to market. I don't know if it actually will whenever we start screwing around with things around, you know, myostatin and muscle and all that kind of stuff. Definitely, yeah, I don't know. I think there's going to be maybe something that's going to pop up, but we'll potentially see. I haven't seen enough of the data yet. So yeah, nonetheless, some interesting and cool things. Blossom Queen, what's your thought on Ozempic? So as per the usual, I mean, Ozempic's it's a good medication, highly effective at managing blood sugars, but also pretty good on the weight loss perspective of it, particularly when we're looking at the Wegovy dosing, which goes up to 2.4 milligrams once a week. Yeah, proven to be really, really quite effective for helping to manage weight. There are the downsides of side effects, so GI mostly in nature, but overall, yeah, pretty top-notch medication. Hey there, thoughts on Contrave for people who binge eat? So Contrave could certainly be an option for individuals that have binge eating disorder. It's not nearly as potent in terms of the medications like Vyvanse and the other stimulants and stuff like that. So binge eating disorder is kind of complex because there's a lot of different factors that are involved. And I kind of tend to lump people who have binge eating disorder into two categories. Type 1, I consider they're the individuals that it doesn't matter through the day when they have a binge, there is some kind of emotional trigger that is tied to it. So boss yelled at them, partner yelled at them, something like that. And it can be any time of the day. And that ultimately triggers a binging episode. Okay. So it's very emotionally driven and that sort of thing. And the full on, you know, not or losing control, not sure what they're doing, a lot of shame and disgust that's around it and that sort of thing. And then on the flip side of things, the type 2 group, these are kind of the ones where it's not as direct of an association. What I find with these people, they tend to be the ones that binge in the evenings and kind of the late night bingers after dinner, before dinner, later in the day. And what's kind of happening with them, I tend to find, is they're just not eating enough food earlier in the day. So as your day goes on and you're at work and you're well rested earlier in the day, it's easier to, say, resist the cookies or donuts in the break room or what have you. But after working all day and being exhausted, you come home, maybe you have dinner, or maybe you don't have anything prepared, don't quite know what to do, or what you're going to eat. And so then you turn around and basically eat everything in sight because you're starving at that point, but you don't have that block or that inhibition anymore because you're tired, you're exhausted. It's the end of the day, you're getting ready to go to bed. All of these sorts of things are kind of coming into play. So that's kind of the type 2 group. Generally, the type 2 group, well, I mean, both groups with this kind of binge eating disorder can be corrected through just eating better and more consistently and higher amounts of protein, particularly earlier in the day. The type 2 group especially gets that help from it, and getting that aspect in helping in that component of things. So, so whether Contrave can be beneficial, it really depends person to person, and maybe what are some of the underlying components that are going on there. I have seen some people that have the benefit with it, but it's tough to say whether it's because of Contrave or whether it's because we've kind of corrected their dietary patterns concurrently and stuff like that. So a couple of different factors that need to be taken into account, whether and how effective it's going to be. For the type 1 group, who is more of an emotional response, not so much, not as much. I would be much more leaning towards putting them on, say, Vyvanse or something like that, and getting a lot more emotional, psychological counseling in order to help them better manage their emotional feelings and responses and stuff like that. So yeah, it's not definitely a go-to, but also it certainly can be something that's beneficial. And then further, if we're looking at people who also have concurrent ADHD, which a lot of times goes hand in hand with binge eating disorder, and kind of in a similar sense in that they become distracted through the day, they forget to eat and that sort of thing. And so that can ultimately lead to a binge, kind of more in the type 2 category, but certainly more of a, kind of a dysregulation from the dopamine function and stuff like that. And so Contrave and bupropion in particular, the component of Contrave, definitely has some evidence for helping to manage ADHD and the neurological pathway there. It's not super duperly effective, but certainly has a role and can help for some people. All right. Contrave, Contrave people who binge eat. You have such an attractive voice. Well, that is the first time I think I've ever heard that. So I will take that. Thank you. Blossom Queen, I'm on the 0.5 of Ozempic. I feel it's not working. I was on Contrave and lost weight faster on it. Well, I think the first thing that you've got going on there, Blossom Queen, is need to check the expectations around weight loss. And kind of whenever we start looking at it and how fast and rapidly the weight is coming off, we're definitely going to run into issues and problems in that our expectations of our weight loss progress are not aligned with what actually happens in terms of weight loss. And initially, when you go on something or a diet or whatever, your weight loss at the start is likely going to be faster because you're just burning more calories by simply existing and haven't undergone the metabolic adaptations and that sort of thing. The more weight you lose, the slower your weight loss progress is going to be. And that's just the reality of the matter. So if you have an idea that you should be losing weight at this given rate the entire time, it's just not going to happen. And ultimately, if that expectation isn't checked, what's going to end up happening is the weight loss is going to slow, and then you're going to get discouraged because you're not meeting this expectation, getting this unmet expectation. Weight loss slows. You eventually then throw up your hands and say, screw it, come off, weight comes back on. So yeah, definitely keeping that in mind as well, checking your dietary patterns, making sure you're eating enough protein, in a calorie deficit, exercising, particularly weightlifting. If everybody in the world could weightlift, we would all be much healthier. Yeah. Miri Taco. Why do I lose an entire day after I take the Ozempic pen shot? The next day, sluggish and headache. So Ozempic, Ozempic, all of these drugs all have different half-lives and different pharmacokinetics and how they work in the body and stuff like that. So when it comes to, say, Saxenda, for example, its half-life is about 24 hours. And so it will peak in your system in about 2 to 3 hours. Because you see, the way that these drugs work is that it's not like you just inject it and then you have the same dose over the course of a period that until your next dose. They take the injection, they rise for a little bit, and then they start to come down towards the end of the half-life period as the drug gets metabolized. So Saxenda, within a couple of hours, the drug is peaking in your system, and then it starts to fall back down to where it was prior to the dose that you did earlier in the day. Ozempic, the half-life is about 7 days. And so it usually peaks in the system, depends on the person, 24 to 48 hours to 72 hours after they took their dose. And then over the course of the rest of the week, it starts to fall. So a lot of people, when they do their injection of Ozempic the next day or a couple of days after their dose, that's when they tend to get the increase in their side effects and stuff like that. So whether it's sluggishness, headache, nausea, those sorts of things, it's going to peak and follow that dose response curve essentially as the medication kind of comes into the body. And generally most people towards the end of the week with Ozempic and these once weekly drugs start to feel better towards the end of the week as the drug concentration starts to come back down closer to where it was prior to your other dose. So hopefully that helps. Blossom Queen, also can one be on Contrave and Ozempic at the same time? So yeah, I mean, certainly they could be. If, you know, I've talked about this before, there's not a heck of a lot of data in terms of stacking these medications on top of each other. But if you're using, say, Ozempic for diabetes, and then you wanted to add on something for weight loss or what have you, yeah, Contrave could certainly be something that you kind of add on and use in that perspective of it. There would be no interactions per se, and I've seen people use these medications together, but if you're specifically using both medications for weight loss, we don't have a heck of a lot of data to say how effective it is, nor do we really have the data around the safety component of it. Like I said, it likely is safe. There's no major interactions or anything like that, or really any interactions that I think we're aware of. So yeah, there's kind of that component of it. So it's not impossible, but yeah, we just don't have a lot of data around to say yay or nay on it. Mystical Mystic on YouTube. I'm on 2 milligrams of Ozempic in Canada. I've been approved to increase my dosage of Wegovy, or increase to the Wegovy dosage of 2.4 milligrams. Is it okay to inject 2.5 milligrams instead because it's easier with the Ozempic pen? I honestly, I mean, 2.4 is kind of where it maxes out. 2.5, yes, it may be easier, but I honestly wouldn't recommend it just because we don't have any data of the dose going above 2.5 or that 2.4 milligram mark. And that could certainly lead to more side effects and that sort of thing. So what I always recommend with these like Ozempic pens, particular, if you have them, the nice thing about them is that you can click it up. Well, I can't click this one up, but as you click it up, you get the various clicks. There's lots of graphs online that show how many clicks are at each dosage amount or whatever like that. So for your dose, if you have 0.4 milligrams that you're doing, you can figure out how many clicks would be as close to 0.4. And then what you can do is click it up, count the clicks up to that 0.4. And then once you reach that point, before you do the injection, take like a Sharpie or whatever, and then mark a line there so that you can just click up to the pen again for that 0.4. And yeah, that's kind of what I'd recommend there for kind of just making it easier versus going to 2.5 milligrams. But that's the nice thing about the Ozempic pens and how you can kind of customize your dose. So food for thought, I suppose. June Mary, definitely the type 2 binge eating disorder. Fair enough. Yeah, that's kind of what most people fall into. Type 1, yeah, I haven't worked with a whole bunch of people that are necessarily type 1, just because there's usually a lot of complex comorbidities there. And I would say even just a lot more shame and not necessarily seeking help from healthcare providers and that sort of thing. So it's definitely very challenging and getting into, yeah, very complex etiology, pathophysiology, and that sort of thing. So, and then Butters, thank you. I appreciate your input. My pleasure. Charmaine, I started taking Quizmia 3 weeks now, and I don't have any weight loss, but I am tired all the time. So, I mean, there's so many factors and things to look at. Again, as I always say, these medications aren't anything that's magical. So if you're still not in a calorie deficit while taking these medications, you're not going to lose weight. That's just the cold hard truth on that one. So if you're not in a calorie deficit on a consistent basis, not Monday through Friday, then Saturday, Sunday, you kind of ease up on things. It's, you know, consistently you're in a calorie deficit, then you're going to ultimately lose weight. So making sure that's kind of all in check there. If you're getting tired, generally what's kind of happening there is that, yeah, your calories are probably down, and you are likely losing weight. So it now becomes, okay, well, what are we defining as weight loss? And are you taking one weigh-in once a week? Are you weighing in every day to see the trends and stuff like that? Always kind of keeping that in mind. Or are you down, you know, 0.3, 0.5 of a pound, or maybe you're down 0.7 of a pound. So again, what are kind of your expectations in terms of your weight loss progress? And are you being reasonable in that respect? Are you actually moving in the right direction? How consistent you're being? All of these kinds of things need to be taken into account. Yeah, to say whether it is, and you're also 3 weeks in, like you just started your journey. So yeah, kind of keeping those things in mind and double checking some things. Haley, Leah, taking a medication that causes rapid weight gain, would Ozempic or Wegovy work with those medications? It really depends on the medication itself. For the most part, I mean, yeah, Wegovy and Ozempic can help to manage things like cravings and weight gain that can occur with other medications. So common class of medications would be the antipsychotic medications or mood disorder medications. So that's going to be things like olanzapine, Seroquel. I can't think of any other ones right now, but those are kind of the main ones in that class that are weight promoting. And so we definitely likely want to keep those medications on, depending on what we're using them to treat and stuff like that, because the benefit outweighs the risk. I mean, certainly there is the opportunity to potentially switch the medication if you can. But if you can't, and that's the medication that you're kind of stuck with, and its benefit outweighs the risk of weight gain, then yeah, Ozempic, Wegovy could be used to help counteract some of the craving increases that can happen. Those medications can sometimes, or we have some evidence that they may potentially affect things like glucose metabolism and how our body uses calories and stuff. So yeah, so a couple of different things in that regard, but yeah, follow up with your doctor and pharmacist, and they would for sure be able to tell you yay or nay. Anne on YouTube. So Anne I've been on a weight loss roller coaster for years. I've been on Saxenda for 17 weeks and I'm down 20 pounds. But already afraid of gaining the weight back. Any suggestions on the best way to maintain weight? So if you're on your weight management journey, the great thing about these medications is that they kind of offer an opportunity to really build in some really good habits. So in order to lose weight and keep the weight off, whatever you're doing has to ultimately be sustainable. So a lot of people need to stay on these medications lifelong in order to help them to manage their appetite, cravings, hunger, all those kinds of things. But also to keep weight off in the long term, a couple of things that we know are very effective at helping with that are first and foremost going to be activity. Now, cardiovascular activity, walking and stuff like that, it's all fantastic. It's great. I don't want to say not do it or anything, but resistance training, in particular lifting weights, is hugely beneficial. It not only helps us to build muscle, which ultimately helps our body to burn more calories, it helps us to build strength and health. And it also is another really great marker that workout to workout, you're going to see gains and increases in the weights that you're lifting and stuff like that. And so weightlifting and resistance training, hugely beneficial, and can be a real big marker in that respect. The next big thing that you're going to want to be doing is making sure you're eating an adequate amount of protein. A lot of people tend to undereat on their protein, which I see all the time. They're hungry all the time. And when we correct how much protein that they're taking in, they're much better to able to manage their hunger, and overall their energy levels improve. Like the benefits of protein are astronomical. The other big things would be looking at, eating consistently throughout the day. So constantly having particularly protein, but having fuel going into the system. Our body wants to take on, wants food throughout the day, particularly protein, because our body can't store protein. We can store carbohydrates, we can store fat, but we can't store protein. So we need continuous pulses of protein through the day in order to properly nourish our body and to properly manage the hunger signaling and chatter and stuff like that in our brain. The other big things would be looking at, eating breakfast has been shown to be quite effective. Eating breakfast, plenty of veggies, working with whole foods, trying to reduce how much processed food you're taking in, being, reducing treats and stuff like that, but also being mindful of that. You don't want to be reducing and cutting them out altogether, but maybe having more mindful plans around having your favorite treat. I always talk about Christmas with people, and we get this idea that we have to bake all of the goodies and all that kind of stuff. But I always talk about, well, why don't you just make the things that you like actually really enjoy, like the things that your family enjoys or your friends enjoy and you enjoy? Why not make those specific things versus like making everything just because it's Christmas, right? So make the things that you actually want to eat and enjoy the shit out of them. Don't cut them out of your life. Like having that balance there is going to help to manage the biology, your wanting, cravings, and hunger and stuff like that, and help you create a better relationship with food. And ultimately, all of those things combined and consistently doing them along with sleep and all the other great stuff is going to help you to keep the weight off and maintain your weight in the long term. So that's kind of all the things that I look at there. Dabis World, can Ozempic cause thyroid cancer? My doctor mentioned it today. All right, so the thyroid cancer debate. As of right now, we have yet to see a human study or have directly linked any humans to developing thyroid cancer from using Ozempic, Wegovy, Saxenda, all the above, all the GLP-1 medications. It's a black box warning on these medications because what we found in animal trials is that when we gave the drug to, I think it was mice or another animal that we used, what we found is that there was an increased amount of medullary thyroid carcinoma that was developing. Now, we don't know, we do want to still screen people if they have a history of medullary thyroid carcinoma, a very specific and rare type of thyroid cancer, as well as a condition called Meds Q+A. We don't want to give it to them because we don't want to take that risk and potentially have them develop the cancer. Again, we haven't seen it in humans yet, but we did see it in rodent models, and we don't exactly know the mechanism of action. And so what we do know is that rodents and mice have a GLP-1 receptor in their thyroid. Humans also have a GLP-1 receptor in their thyroid. So we know that. And it seems to be that the GLP-1 receptor, when we increase the levels of it in these mice, ultimately it bounded their thyroids. And for some of the mice, it ultimately led to them developing this thyroid carcinoma. The thing is that it looks like the pathway and the way that GLP-1 binds to our thyroid in humans and stuff like that, there's a different cascading effect in terms of, how it interacts and what ultimately happens. And in humans, it doesn't seem to actually cause thyroid cancer or medullary thyroid carcinoma. However, we haven't definitively proven that yet. And so overall, again, there's no humans that we've seen or yet that have been documented that have seen the direct drug causing thyroid carcinoma. And so at this point in time, the risk is essentially zero, but we can't say it 100% because we just don't fully understand the mechanism yet. But overall, it's very, 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 very low. So yeah, but it's something we need to talk about just so that you're aware of the risks, that it may happen, so that you can make the most informed decision about what's ultimately best for you. Mystical Mystic. How many days after my Ozempic injection should I get my second pneumonia vaccine? Oh, geez, now we're getting into stuff that I kind of know but don't know. So overall, when it comes to like your pneumonia vaccine and your Ozempic injection, you don't really need to space them out. There's no real interaction or anything like that. Some people will get like side effects to a pneumonia vaccine, and so the next day they might feel kind of like a bag of crap. If your Ozempic injection the next day, you're feeling also like a bag of crap, you can either double it up, do them both on the same day, next day feel like a really big bag of crap, or you can kind of spread them out and reduce some of the potential side effects and that sort of thing in order to help to limit and reduce them. So no real hard and fast rules. Going to be more or less kind of just looking at the various side effects and that sort of thing. So hopefully that helps. M. Spellin, day 5 Ozempic, no side effects. In fact, I actually feel better. Worried I don't have the nausea. I mean, why would you be worried that you don't have the nausea? I mean, that's fantastic if you have no side effects. So a lot of people think that the nausea, the nausea is what ultimately leads to the weight loss effects of these medications. But the nausea it's a side effect, right? So these drugs can cause nausea for a couple of reasons. Number one, they slow down how quickly food moves from your stomach to your small intestine. So food's not moving through as quickly, so you're going to feel a greater amount of fullness more quickly. You're going to be able to eat less and that sort of thing. The thing is that this movement, when food's not moving, if it's not going down, the only way it has to go is up. So it can cause some nausea. Now, we also think there's some mechanism in the brain that it also acts on to cause the nausea as well. Again, another piece that we haven't quite fully teased out yet, but we kind of think there's something there. Anyways, what ends up happening with this movement of food through your stomach is that eventually your body gets used to the medication and that all speeds up again. So how quickly food moves from your stomach to your small intestine, the speed and rate of it ultimately increases back to normal again, and the nausea and stuff like that will ultimately resolve, and so your body will get used to it. But it doesn't mean it's not working, because the main mechanism that these drugs act in terms of helping with weight management is within the brain, in decreasing our wanting of food, decreasing your appetite, increasing your satiety signaling, and all of those sorts of things. And so if you don't have nausea, it just means you don't have nausea. It doesn't mean the drug isn't working. So no worries, no concerns there. Another question on YouTube. Is it okay to take Premier Protein Shake, which contains iron, if my ferritin is elevated? How many per day can I have? So that's definitely a question you'd have to follow up with your doctor. And it depends on like why your ferritin level is elevated. So ferritin is kind of like the storage of how much iron we have stored in our bodies and available in our bodies. And ferritin can sometimes vary for a couple of reasons. It's also an inflammatory marker. So if ferritin levels are elevated, that indicates that there's some degree of inflammation going on. And so that could be because of things like fatty liver, which maybe that's why we're using these medications and that sort of thing, or what have you. So really tough to say. I mean, iron to some degree, depending on what you're eating on a day-to-day, is going to be present in food. You can't avoid it altogether, or you're going to suddenly get very, very unhealthy. But you should be working with your doctor to figure out what the underlying cause of the ferritin increase is, if it's inflammatory or what have you. and yeah, just kind of seeing what are the limits in terms of what you can have for iron and that sort of thing in terms of your requirements and stuff like that. So really tough to say. But yeah, I would talk to your doctor about it and kind of look at that aspect of it, and just making sure it's safe for you overall, because iron is in a lot of things from spinach to meat to you name it. It's out there. So yeah, I don't have a good hard answer on that one for you. Donna, thoughts on goal weights? Better to reduce weight and keep off versus reaching BMI chart healthy weights. Yeah. So the whole ideal weight and all that kind of stuff and BMI, the BMI does have its place in terms of research and screening and stuff like that, but fundamentally it's a flawed metric that just doesn't really tell us a heck of a lot. I always like to use myself as an example. For 5'10", and I weigh in at 200 pounds, sometimes I'm up to 205, 210. And once I start getting into that category, I mean, above like 170, like 170 is my ideal weight, somewhere around there for 5'10". And I'm 30 pounds above that, but I have a lot more muscle than the average guy that's 5'10". And so for me to say, what's my ideal weight? Well, I sit quite comfortably at 200 pounds, 195, somewhere in there. I'm weightlifting, I'm doing cardio, I'm doing and following all of these health behaviors and stuff like that. Am I unhealthy? No. I mean, if you look at blood work and everything like that, everything seems to be good. So no concerns or anything like that there. So this is quite a healthy and natural weight for me. My body just sits here quite comfortably. I don't really have to try too hard or anything like that to go up or down, or to keep it here. I can be relatively, intuitive, I guess, with my eating and stuff like that, but it depends on my goals. So I usually say, aim for a weight that ultimately works for you. And if you add in, resistance training, weightlifting, and that sort of thing, you might find that your ideal weight is suddenly higher because you just have more muscle mass, which is awesome. More muscle mass is definitely a good thing. Yeah, there's going to be diminishing returns on it. And, if you look at the guys that are on bodybuilding stages and stuff, yeah, that level of muscle mass is ridiculous. And yeah, it's going to come with its own set of health complications, as well as all the various substances you need to use in order to reach that level of physique. But for day-to-day stuff, the more muscle you can have, especially going into your older years and stuff like that, the much better health you're overall going to be in. So I tend not to use it. Find a weight that ultimately works for you. And if it's the ideal, okay, fantastic. If it's not, which 99% of the people it will not be, then yeah, don't bother with it. Kind of figure out what's going to work for you. All right. And on YouTube, where did your interest and knowledge of obesity and weight loss come from? All right. So it's a bit of a loaded answer, but I'll give you a quick breakdown. So I have done 3 university degrees. I did a Bachelor of Science in microbiology, and then I did a Bachelor of Science in pharmacy. And then I wasn't quite ready to be an adult yet and didn't quite know what I wanted to do with my life as a pharmacist when I graduated with my BSc. So I went back and I got my doctorate of pharmacy. Still kind of didn't know what I wanted to do with life, but I got a lot of exposure to community practice, to primary care. I can't remember the word of it is, but more or less kind of looking at the preventative side of medicine versus kind of the more reactive medicine that you see, say, in hospitals and stuff like that. So I got that exposure there. I was working with a lot of people that had diabetes. I was working with physicians directly in the clinics, and they were referring their patients to me. And whatever we were doing was kind of working, but we were talking about lifestyle and whatnot, and people weren't really making changes. And there's a struggle back and forth, and I didn't quite understand why. And then I got connected up with Novo Nordisk. These are the guys that make Ozempic and Saxenda. And they were the ones that had Saxenda that had just recently come to market. and no one was really on it. No one really knew what it was. No one really knew how to deal with it. And so they started talking to me about it and offered me all this training and flew me out various places. And I did some consulting work with them and some contract work with them and stuff. And they did all this training with obesity medicine. And I fell in love with the area. I thought they were doing something really cool. And the reason why I thought it was so cool was because they didn't, like here in Canada, we didn't have really any drugs to use for weight loss. We really had to look at more of the lifestyle, behavioral components. And so there was a large focus on that, at least initially, because yeah, we didn't have access to drugs and people needed help. So there was a lot of training around that component of it. And it's exactly kind of the stuff that I love doing and helping people with, and kind of understanding patterns, behaviors, and habits. And so it meshed so beautifully and perfectly with how I wanted to practice. And so got specialized in that. I got a certification as a bariatric educator. There was a board certification, or there is a board certification called the American Board of Obesity Medicine down in the States. Now it's technically only for physicians, but they have the criteria that physicians have to go through to get that training. So I went through all of that criteria and training, and basically would just need to write the exam if I was a physician to get that board certification. So I got all of that. And then I kind of did some more around nutrition and more education and that sort of thing. And so that's all been kind of adding and contributing to me building my practice. And then, yeah, now I'm doing a postdoctoral fellowship and kind of getting more into the research world of things. And that's going to open up some more doors to allow me to do research in obesity medicine and all of those things. So that's kind of my credentialing and how I kind of got started in this area and stuff like that. More on my interest around it, well, that's a lot far back as I can remember. Essentially, I struggled with my weight as a kid. I had very, very severe body dysmorphia. And at 12 years old, I started lifting weights and that sort of thing, and had this image that Arnold Schwarzenegger was like what I had to be as a man. And yeah, was lifting weights. And then at 16, I got jumped at a party, had my jaw broken. Almost died, actually. Well, not almost died, but if you would have kept kicking me in the head, yeah, I might not be here today. And so with that, had my jaw broken, had my jaw wired shut for 6 weeks, lost 40 pounds in 6 weeks. Definitely don't recommend it. It's not an ideal way to lose weight. I was drinking nothing but Ensure shakes and blended chunky soup. Quite a horrible time. And then from there, I continued to struggle with my weight, but I was considerably smaller, and I was in this different world of, I was getting attention from girls, the bullying at school stopped, yada, yada, the list goes on and on. And yeah, I kind of had my own struggles over the years and kind of overcoming and working my way through that. And so it blended together perfectly with this whole area and my ability to come and help people and stuff like that, and to understand some of the plights and issues and chatter and, you know, things that kind of go on in your mind and the conversations that you have. And yeah, so it's kind of all just beautifully come together, kind of the short, longish answer, if you will. So hope that kind of answers that. What's going on, Liz? Susie, hello from Australia. Question, do you think Ozempic truly helps PCOS and insulin resistance symptoms? Yeah, so for the most part, yeah, it is. It's very, very effective at helping with PCOS. I mean, PCOS is kind of a complex condition with a lot of different phenotypes or different presentations, if you will. And so Ozempic and the GLP-1s are very effective at helping with insulin resistance all on their own, which can really help resolve a lot of the issues that come with PCOS. They can certainly help to downregulate some of the appetite and cravings and wanting for food. And that's often the case with PCOS that we see in weight. It's not necessarily a metabolism issue. It's more that your appetite is increased due to the hormonal dysfunction that's kind of happening in your body and stuff. So that's what tends to lead to the weight gain. So these drugs can be very effective at helping to mitigate and manage that aspect, and ultimately help you to lose weight and stuff. So yeah, they definitely can help with PCOS. Is there anything that can be done to lessen the side effects? So there's lots that can be done in terms of managing nausea, constipation, fatigue and all those wonderful things. Yeah, there's lots of, it would really depend on person to person. If you check out my YouTube channel at the official Dr. Dan, I have a whole list of videos that goes over all the side effects and how to mitigate and manage them and stuff like that. So you definitely can check that out. And I go into a lot more detail, but it really depends on what you're dealing with. The first things that we look at are small, frequent meals, bland foods, trying not to lay down within an hour of eating, those sorts of things. And then, yeah, kind of going from there. And there are pharmaceuticals and stuff that we could potentially use in the short term to help manage things. But yeah, that's kind of definitely ways to help manage some of those. So question on YouTube. I was only on Saxenda for a little over a month, lost a reasonable amount for a month, developed cholecystitis and wound up having a cholecystectomy. I'm not sure if Saxenda is still an option. So yeah, when people lose weight quite rapidly, and sometimes not necessarily super rapidly, but just they had the right things kind of lined up. And what ultimately happened is that some weight loss can ultimately trigger and quickly worsen gallstones that are already present in the gallbladder. And so what happens when people lose weight very quickly is they get a large dump of cholesterol, which is found in the is a component of fats and that sort of thing. And so that cholesterol ultimately collects in our gallbladder, which then gets dumped out into the GI tract. But if a large amount collects very quickly, it then collects in the gallbladder, it can crystallize, form gallstones, really piss off the gallbladder, ultimately leading to the gallbladder needing to be removed. And then, yeah, after that, you're generally good to go. Saxenda is still definitely an option that could be considered. You'd have to ultimately talk with your doctor to see, what other factors you might have going on. But yeah, there's lots of people who have had to come off of Saxenda because they developed, basically their gallbladder got pissed off and had to be taken out, and they were able to go back on it and stuff like that with no problem. But definitely always something to kind of keep in mind with any kind of rapid weight loss. And so we want to try and mitigate that, but obviously that always can't be the case. So yeah, hope that helps. 18 clicks is my dose. Yeah, really depends person to person. So never thought of the Sharpie idea. Thanks. I have to take 1.5. Yeah, marking up the dose of where you need to. I wonder if I've got a pen that has, well, this one does. So yeah, you can click it up. And then when you get to that, whatever amount of clicks, just Sharpie right there. And you can do that as your dose. Then you just click up each time and you're good to go. So yeah, hope that helps. Hi, Dr. Dan. Do you know when Mounjaro will be available in Canada? So good old Mounjaro. I don't have a specific date on when it's supposed to be available. Last time I talked to various drug rep friends and stuff like that, it's supposed to be coming up sometime in March. I know it's approved for diabetes management here in Canada, but in terms of pharmacies getting access to it, we currently don't have access to it. So it's not on pharmacy shelves or anything, but hopefully it will be in March here, but stay tuned. Really tough to say. I know they have corrected the shortage that they were talking about with Mounjaro in the States. They've also corrected the Wegovy shortage in the States as well. So I'm hopeful that ultimately means that both of those medications will be here in Canada and other parts of the world in the very, very near future. So tough to say, hopefully in the next couple of months, but we will have to see. Taking Ozempic for a year, lost 40 pounds, now at a plateau for the last 4 months. Any suggestions? So this is the most common question that I think I receive from people. But whenever it reaches a point where you've plateaued and you've kind of just been chilling for a long period of time, usually what I recommend at that point is take a break. Figure out what your maintenance level of calories are. Take a break, chill out. And yeah, don't continue dieting for, I would say, a couple of months. Start resistance training, doing more activity, and really focusing on health for those couple of months periods, and then look at creating a calorie deficit there afterwards. probably one of the best things you can do. Because if you're plateauing, there's a number of metabolic adaptations. You're likely burnt out from the dieting side of things. So take some time, chill out, and more importantly, bring your calories up to what your maintenance level should be at your current age, height, and weight, and current activity level. And then do that for a while and just take the strain off. Yeah, usually that's quite successful for most people. And if done properly, there's maybe 1 or 2 pounds that are gained back, and more or less the weight that's gained back is actually just because you're eating more food and stuff. So more water, more poop, all those sorts of things. To calculate your maintenance calories, I have a calculator on my website, healthevolve.co/TDE. If you just punch that into the either search bar on Google or whatever, it should pop up for you. And if you select optimal health, fill out all the questions, and it will tell you what your current maintenance level of calories is for your age, height, and weight and activity level. And it'll also tell you how much protein you should be taking in at that age, height, and weight and everything. So that would be your maintenance and can give you that info. Again, that's healthevolved.co, O is in orange, /TDEE, or I think the link is in my various bios and stuff. West Van Wardell's Ozempic for type 2 with metformin intermittent fasting have very strong sugar cravings. Yeah, because you're intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting, I mean, I throw a lot of shade at keto and intermittent fasting, and not so much that there's anything wrong with it per se, but 99% of the people that I work with in this space, it ultimately doesn't work for them. Plus, I also really dislike all of the various influencers that say this is the gift from God for whatever reason that isn't backed by science in any kind of way. But there's no superior benefit to intermittent fasting. In fact, there's evidence to show that you lose more muscle tissue, which ultimately can lead to and make managing your weight a hell of a more harder. That didn't make any sense, but makes managing your weight harder. You're losing muscle tissue. It can potentially lead to binge eating disorder because you're restricting and then to some degree binging and stuff like that. But if you have a craving for something, that's an indication that your body wants to have that, wants to have, whatever that sugar craving is. And so trying to restrict it further, well, if I tell you not to think about the purple elephant, what are you going to think about? So this is a situation where trying to incorporate it in a more mindful manner and thinking about, I'm going to have the treat that I really love. Maybe you can pick up one cookie or one donut or one cupcake or whatever, have it, enjoy it, and try to incorporate it in your life on a more regular basis, maybe once a week, maybe once a month. But ultimately, you're going to help to decrease that wanting and craving for it if you learn to incorporate it in your life. If you continue to restrict it and cut it out, coupled with something like intermittent fasting and being in a calorie deficit and not properly nourishing your body, eventually biology is going to take over and you'll get near it. And those are the cases where people will say, well, if I have just one, then it's all of them kind of thing. It's like, yeah, because you restricted too much. You haven't properly nourished your body. So that's generally what I recommend in those cases. Lola, hi, got pancreatitis 3 times, ended in the hospital, so painful, doctor took me off. Pancreatitis is, again, a really rare side effect with the GLP-1 medications. And again, the pancreatitis we find is more commonly associated with the gallstone issue that I talked about earlier, because when you have gallstones and your gallbladder gets irritated, your pancreas gets irritated, and so you get pancreatitis. And pancreatitis really sucks. There's often also other confounding factors with pancreatitis in these drugs. So if you have diabetes or blood sugar issues, that increases your risk of pancreatitis. If you have high triglycerides, that will increase it. If you consume a lot of alcohol, that can increase it. So there's often a lot of confounders and stuff. And if we can remove the confounders, generally the medications are okay still, but there's a small chance that the medication could still ultimately lead to pancreatitis. And so, yeah, we need to take people off of those medications to ensure that pancreatitis doesn't happen again, because yes, it is very painful and not something anybody should go through. So other weight loss meds that you could look to would be things like Contrave. Contrave is the biggest one that's out there. Orlistat. If you're in the States, there's phentermine and topiramate combo. So there are other options and stuff. Yeah, you just need to chat with your doctor. Allison, can you explain the best place to inject in the thigh? I tried once, but it hurt quite a bit. So generally the best place for your thigh is kind of like if you're just looking down at your thigh and just right on the top parts of your thigh is where we generally recommend injecting it. Pretty large space there. And so lots of room to kind of inject and stuff. If your thighs don't have a lot of fat and they're more muscular or it's very close to the muscle and stuff, yeah, it might be more painful. And in fact, I wouldn't recommend injecting there. You want to try and inject it into the fat tissue just because that is where we have more efficacy data and stuff and how well it works. And yeah, it's a lot less painful and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of what I'd recommend there. So if you're a bariatric patient, what would you recommend? It's a loaded question. I mean, there's a lot of things when we look at weight management for just any patients. I mean, the first thing is going to be lifestyle modification. So are you achieving a calorie deficit? Are you getting enough protein, enough veggies, eating consistently through the day? All those beautiful things. Are you lifting weights, working out? Again, all of those things. Potentially it might be medications depending on the individual. So it could be the addition of those. Again, it's going to depend on the assessment and see what's best for you as an individual as to which drug we would pick. And depending on the severity and that sort of thing of your obesity, then we'd be looking at potentially surgery as well. And so whether it's a sleeve, whether it's a Roux-en-Y, there's multiple different options that could be trialed and tried. And yeah, they could all be potentials for you in terms of helping you to manage your weight. So lots of things would just need to be looked at and understood. Lola, Ozempic was great, no side effects until 9 months after 3 days, and later found I had pancreatic or pancreatitis. Yeah, that sometimes can happen. Can you take berberine with Ozempic? As far as I know, you can. How much benefit or any benefit you're going to get from it, it's tough to say. The evidence is pretty mixed on berberine overall. I generally don't recommend it to people as an option, but yeah, it's certainly something you could look at and just double check with your doctor that it's what's best for you overall. So. Mystical Mystic on YouTube. Before Ozempic, my body was firm, but in the 20 weeks I have been on it, my body turned to mush. Lost 20 pounds, averaging 1 loss per week. So, I mean, there's multiple factors that could kind of be going on there. I mean, fat to some degree can have some firmness to it. And so if you lose fat, then yeah, that fat, you're going to have more skin tissue there and that sort of thing. And so the firmness that was there with the fat can certainly occur. If you're not eating adequate amounts of protein, and certainly if you're not lifting weights and working out and that sort of thing, you can also be losing muscle mass, which is going to reduce, again, the firmness and tone and that sort of thing. So yeah, looking at those things. Yeah, there's lots of things that could potentially be going on there, but overall sounds like a relatively slow and progressive and great amount of weight loss. 1 pound per week is usually what I aim for. Kayla, I just got a prescription for Contrave and I'm scared of the side effects. Yeah, I mean, there are side effects, and there's side effects with anything, right? If you drink too much water, you can get side effects to it. That's why we start slow and kind of take our time with it and stuff like that. In terms of the main ones that people are most concerned about, usually it's the seizure thing. And that's because of the bupropion component within Contrave. So bupropion at very high doses, usually doses of 600 milligrams plus, it can lower the seizure threshold. What the seizure threshold is it's basically the line that if the right set of circumstances for an individual click, they can ultimately have a seizure. Now, if you don't have a history of seizures and stuff like that, very unlikely that's going to happen. If you have risk factors for potentially having a seizure, which would be electrolyte abnormalities, consuming large amounts of alcohol, all those sorts of things, then yeah, there's a greater risk of having a seizure. But for most people, you would need to take a large dose of that bupropion. The max dose of bupropion in Contrave is 320 milligrams per day. So that's the top dose. And yeah, so you're not anywhere near that. So generally that side effect is, again, very small, very nil, not impossible, but overall risk is very low. Other side effects, I mean, you can't take opioids with Contrave because of the naltrexone component. So just making sure you're not taking that, because that's not necessarily the drug causing a side effect, but that's the opioids and the receptor being blocked and all that sort of thing, a whole other issue. The other big side effects that can sometimes happen is some people might have some sweating. If you have low blood pressure, it could raise your blood pressure. Some people do experience like things like racing heart and that sort of thing. Bupropion can stimulate and be activating and stuff. Generally, it's pretty rare, but it certainly can occur. And then people talk about kind of the mood swings aspects of things. We don't really see it with bupropion in terms of like mood swings. And generally, it's been in people that we've been looking at when we've been trying to manage a mood disorder, such as depression or anxiety. And antidepressants tend to get a bad rap because of some data out there that says, it increases your risk of suicidal ideation. And it doesn't really increase the risk of it. What the issue is that someone could be very, very severely depressed and, but they just have no energy, can't get out of bed and that sort of thing. But they could be depressed enough that, yeah, they would rather not be here anymore. And so they start taking medication and the antidepressant starts to work, get to, have its effects and stuff. And so their energy starts to increase a little bit. In that process, they're still depressed. Maybe they're still having suicidal thoughts or that sort of thing. Now they have more energy. Now they have the energy to act on those suicidal thoughts and ultimately, potentially, as for TikTok, delete themselves, if you will. But for most people, that's not really a concern. In terms of just general mood swings, yeah, I mean, some people can just have a negative effect of some of these medications. But yeah, it's not something that we very commonly see, and continue to follow up with your doctor. And if it does start occurring, then you can stop the medication. So yeah. Life with Liz. I've been on Contrave for 3 months now, and it's been life-changing, no side effects. Yeah, if you go check out Life with Liz, she's like documenting her journey, so you can go and check it all out and know how things are going for her. Belly fat like insulin. Vicky, hello from South Carolina. What's going on, Vicky? Butters, what an experience. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being so approachable and non-judgmental. My pleasure. Susie, thank you. Stacks. Should you take breaks from taking Saxenda? No, you should not. Another very common misconception. People think that they should take a break or stop taking Saxenda in order to get it to work again or what have you. As I've always said, the drug is working in the background. It's still having an effect in terms of decreasing your wanting and liking of food and helping you with satiety and stuff like that. If you feel like it's no longer working, fundamentally, you either need to take a break just from dieting altogether, but also you need to look at your dietary patterns. Are you in a calorie deficit anymore? Are you being active? And again, not just for a day or for a couple of days in the week. Have you been consistently doing it for at least 4 weeks? And then, yes, you can kind of look and reassess and see what you need to change and kind of go from there. But taking a break isn't going to add anything. It isn't going to make it work better for you or anything like that, because it's just not how the medication works or anything in that respect of things. yeah, I definitely don't recommend taking breaks with it. Enda quit working for me. Plateau since October. I think I've kind of answered all those questions, if you will, if it's plateauing or what have you. Yeah, a break, looking at your dietary patterns, resistance training. Yeah, that's kind of all the things that you need to look at and take into consideration. Yeah, I don't really have a better answer or an answer that people generally want to hear, unfortunately. But yeah, it's kind of the crappy part about losing weight. It's a process. Like I'm about to start a 8 to 10 week mini cut, if you will. And so during that process, I'll be documenting, kind of how I modify and change and stuff, but I'm only doing it for 8 to 10 weeks because I know that's kind of the period that I can go for losing weight before I get burnt out. And then I'll switch into the process of a reverse diet, bring my calories back up, focus on taking a break, building muscle, all that sort of thing. And then depending on how I'm feeling, I might go into a calorie deficit again. And it's kind of this overall process until I reach whatever my goal is and that sort of thing. Right now, it's to add a little bit more muscle, but also to kind of lean out, and maybe potentially I might compete in a bodybuilding show again. I don't know yet. So yeah, lots of different factors and things that I'm kind of thinking about looking at. But if you want to check me out on Instagram, I'll kind of be posting daily updates. I'm going to try and do it on TikTok, but I just don't know how to quite yet. I guess I could do like the day-to-day or now post kind of thing, but I don't know. We'll figure that out. But if you want kind of more up-to-date daily updates on weigh-ins and kind of what I'm doing, at the official Dr. Dan on the gram, you can check it out there. So that'll hopefully give some people some more insight and kind of importance of breaks and how to go about a break and all that sort of stuff. Question on YouTube: has anybody else decreased the frequency of smoking or nicotine gum after starting semaglutide? My cravings are gone. Yes. So this is one of the very interesting things when it comes to the GLP-1 receptor agonist. It decreases our wanting and liking of not only food in some cases, but also other substances. So lots of people have quit drinking entirely. Lots of people have quit smoking, and that's because it's just working on a similar reward pathway and ultimately helping your brain to just be like, no, we don't need that anymore. We're good. We're happy. We're content. And yeah, it can help to mitigate and manage those cravings. And hopefully it helps you with the long term in helping to mitigate and manage cravings and stuff like that. So yeah, it's currently under a lot of investigation. But yeah, it's shown to have some pretty cool results for some people in that regard of things. So Chris, hi, Doc Dan, you were the best and very helpful. Thank you. My pleasure. Authentic Vic, Dan, so good to see you on the live again. Looking refreshed. Thank you. Please here. Why does Ozempic sometimes affect the pancreas? So the way that GLP-1 medications work, one of the things that they do is they kind of massage our pancreas. And what I mean by that is that it kind of helps the pancreas essentially function more efficiently to not only produce more insulin, but it also helps the cells that produce insulin to kind of stick around for longer. As we age, as everybody ages, our cells, or our beta cells are called, that produce insulin, eventually die as we get older and stuff. And if we all lived long enough, we would all at some point or time develop diabetes because things are just breaking down unless we found a way to preserve that. And so it helps to preserve those cells and make them last longer so they don't break down as quickly. And so are really effective for both of those things, increasing insulin, preserving beta cells, and helping us to manage diabetes and blood sugars. But sometimes what we feel can sometimes happen when we feel it's the drug like Ozempic that's directly causing pancreatitis is that it gets a little bit carried away, and maybe it rubs a little bit too hard on that pancreas or something and irritates it a little bit, makes it run too efficiently or too effectively, or it's kind of like if you haven't worked out for a while and someone all of a sudden gets you to go to the gym 5 days a week, you're probably going to be pretty sore. So kind of thinking about it in that sense, and that it, in some people, it just might overwork it, overstimulate it just a tad, and ultimately leading to pancreatitis sometimes. So yeah, that's actually a pretty good analogy. I like that. Haley really wants to start Wegovy, but it's not available in Canada yet. Yeah, unfortunately, not quite yet, but hopefully in the next couple of months here. Sherry, would upping the dose help a plateau? Maybe. I work out and I'm in a deficit. If you're not losing weight, you're not in a deficit. I don't mean that like in a mean way or a bad way or anything, but fundamentally, if weight is not being lost, you're not in a calorie deficit. Now, a lot of things can affect that calorie deficit. It might be the consistency or what have you, but yeah, there's a lot of things that would need to be looked at and examined and taken into account into fully appreciating it. So certainly you could increase the dose. That might allow you to decrease the calories that are going in more consistently, ultimately achieving a calorie deficit. But if your calorie intake stays the same at a higher dose, ultimately you're not going to lose any further weight because you're still not in a calorie deficit. So yeah, hope that kind of helps. Stacks, I found since starting Saxenda, I smoke less. This is a good thing, but do you know why? Yeah, so as I was kind of talking about earlier, I mean, these drugs are kind of decreasing and working in our reward pathways in the brain, in the hypothalamus. And depending on the individual and how intertwined some of the reward pathways and that sort of thing are connected and whatnot, it can lead to, yeah, kind of decreasing that wanting, not only for food and the food that we're eating and stuff like that, but also things like cigarettes, alcohol, other substances, and that sort of thing. So it's all because it's kind of acting and working within the reward pathway itself and decreasing that wanting and drive for those various foods and whatnot. So yeah, the exact specifics is a whole physiology and neurobiology lecture that I don't have quite in me right now, but yeah, that's kind of the rough breakdown on that, if you will. So hope that helps. On YouTube, the sulfur burps are so nasty. Yes, it's one of the unfortunate aspects that can happen for sure. And does injecting Ozempic cold feel more uncomfortable than letting it get to room temperature before injecting? Yeah, I mean, in general, if you think about it, you're injecting a liquid into your body that, if it's at fridge temperature of 4 degrees, your body's at 36, 37 degrees Celsius or whatever it is in the States, 98. And I don't know what your fridge temperatures are there. But anyways, so yeah, so if you're injecting a cold substance, and then it's kind of like getting when you have a Slurpee or an ice cream and you get brain freeze, right? Something very cold is going into the system. Your body is working to warm it up, but it's not going to feel very good in the process of it. So it can be uncomfortable if you're injecting a cold substance. So if you've kept it in the fridge, whatever pen you're using, whether it's Ozempic, Saxenda, or what have you, the pen that you're using can stay out of the fridge. It's good outside of the fridge for 8 weeks. So if you're using one Ozempic pen, generally at, say, the top dose or whatever, usually it's a pen a month that you're using. And so you can keep it out on the counter, keep it out of direct sunlight and out of like heat extremes. But if it's at room temperature in a cupboard or what have you, it can stay at room temperature and you can use it and inject, no problem. Any pens that you're not using currently, you definitely want to keep them in the fridge. So yeah, you can just mitigate and circumvent all of that, if you will. Beautiful. I think that is all the questions that we're going to do for tonight. You guys have been great. We've been like nailing it for like an hour, a little over an hour each time. Like max dose of Ozempic, semaglutide, which is the molecule in Ozempic. Max dose is 2.4 milligrams for weight loss. For diabetes, it can go up to 2 milligrams per week. Yeah, so it all kind of varies. Stacks, I keep mine in the fridge. Fair enough, peeps. All right, you beautiful people, that is going to be it for tonight. I'm going to go to bed. I'm actually going to go eat, and then I'm going to go to bed. I'm tired. So as always, love all the questions. You all are fantastic. Hopefully that all helped, and we'll be back next Wednesday. And of course, check me out on my other channels at the official Dr. Dan, and love all the support, and yeah, appreciate all the questions, everybody. So I will talk to you beautiful people next week. Oops, power saving. Okay. What are we doing? We want to power off. Sweet. Have a good one, people.